The fluorescent lights of Metro Police Department's precinct buzz overhead like angry wasps as Officer Alexis Carter struggled to balance 3 boxes of case files that seemed designed to test her physical limits rather than her investigative capabilities. At 27, she stood 5 feet 7 inches with shoulder-length blonde hair pulled back in a regulation ponytail that was already coming loose from a morning's menial tasks. Her ice blue eyes, sharp and analytical like cut sapphires, darted around the busy precinct with a kind of situational awareness that would have impressed seasoned detectives if anyone had bothered to notice. Her fit and athletic frame, earned through years of intensive training that she'd never mentioned to anyone at Metro PD, was carefully concealed beneath the standard-issue police uniform that made her look like just another rookie trying to find her place in law enforcement. A small scar on her left shoulder, hidden beneath her sleeve, serve as a permanent reminder of skills and experiences that her fellow officers couldn't even imagine. But what nobody at Metro Police Department knew, what she'd hidden behind 8 months of carefully crafted incompetence and rookie mistakes, was that Officer Alexis Carter was actually FBI Special Agent Alexandra Phoenix Carter, one of the Bureau's most decorated undercover operatives who'd spent 5 years infiltrating criminal organizations that regular law enforcement couldn't even touch. But before we dive into this incredible story that'll completely shatter everything you think you know about rookie cops and federal investigations, make sure you're subscribed to Those Who Left a Trace for more mind-blowing law enforcement revelations that will leave you questioning who's really watching the watchers. Hit that notification bell, because what happens when this FBI agent's cover gets blown will absolutely revolutionize how you think about police work and federal operations. Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, like a king surveying his domain, his imposing 6 feet 1 inch frame and perpetual scowl, creating an atmosphere of intimidation that had crushed the spirits of rookie officers for over 15 years. At 42, Rodriguez had built his reputation on breaking fresh-faced recruits who thought they understood police work after graduating from the academy, and Officer Carter had become his favorite target from the moment she walked into Metro PD looking like she belonged in a college classroom rather than on the mean streets of the city. His weathered face, marked by 2 decades of dealing with the worst humanity had to offer, bore down on Alexis with undisguised contempt as she struggled with paperwork that should have been handled by clerical staff. "Carter, you worthless excuse for a police officer," Rodriguez barked, his voice carrying across the bullpen and drawing snickers from veteran officers who were grateful not to be in the rookie's position. "My dead grandmother could process evidence faster than you, and she's been pushing up daisies for 12 years. Maybe you should have stayed in whatever suburban bubble you crawled out of instead of wasting taxpayer money trying to play cop with the big boys." Alexis gritted her teeth and continued organizing the case files with mechanical precision. Her muscles coiled with controlled tension as she forced herself to maintain the facade of the struggling rookie that had become her cover identity. The other officers in the precinct watched with a mixture of sympathy and relief, understanding that as long as Rodriguez was focused on Carter, they were safe from his particular brand of psychological warfare. But what they didn't know, what Alexis had worked so hard to hide, was that this was her first experience with hostile authority figures and high-pressure law enforcement situations. Growing up as a daughter of a career FBI agent had meant a childhood filled with security protocols, tactical awareness, and expectations that would have crushed most children before they reached their teens. While other kids were playing video games and gossiping about celebrities, Alexis had been learning surveillance techniques from her father's colleagues, studying criminal psychology and federal law, and maintaining the kind of physical fitness that most adults could never achieve. But she'd also learned something else that had brought her to this rundown precinct in the heart of the city, that sometimes the most dangerous criminals operated from within the system itself, protected by badges and brotherhood that made them nearly impossible to investigate through conventional means. "Carter, did you hear me talking to you?" Rodriguez's voice cut through her memories like a rusty knife. "Or are you too busy daydreaming about whatever fantasy world you came from to pay attention to your superior officer who's trying to teach you something about real police work?" "No, sir," Alexis replied with the crisp professionalism that had been drilled into her since childhood, though she carefully added just enough uncertainty to her voice to maintain her cover as a rookie who was still learning the ropes. "Just focusing on getting these files organized properly, Sergeant." Rodriguez stepped closer, his coffee breath hot against her face as he invaded her personal space with the kind of intimidation tactic that had broken stronger officers than Alexis appeared to be. "You know what I think, Carter? I think you're here because some diversity initiative forced the department to hire pretty little blonde girls who have no business carrying a gun or wearing a badge. I think you've never seen real crime, never faced actual danger, and never had to make a split-second decision that could mean the difference between going home alive or going home in a body bag. If only you knew," Alexis thought to herself as she continued organizing files with practiced efficiency, "that she was careful to disguise as clumsy effort. If only you knew that I've been in firefights that would give you nightmares, that I've infiltrated criminal organizations that make your local gang problems look like kindergarten disputes, and that the split-second decisions I've made in the field have saved more lives than you'll ever know." But Alexis said nothing, just as she'd said nothing for the past 8 months while Rodriguez and the other veterans had made her the precinct's primary target for humiliation and hazing. She transferred to Metro PD under carefully constructed credentials that showed her as a recent academy graduate with no prior law enforcement experience, the daughter of middle-class parents who'd worked their way through college to pursue a career in public service. The fabricated background had cost the FBI months of preparation and required approval from the highest levels of federal law enforcement, but it held up under scrutiny from police administrators who had no reason to suspect that a rookie officer was actually a seasoned federal agent conducting the most sensitive investigation of her career. "Carter, you're holding up everyone else's work," Detective Thompson called out from across the bullpen. At 35, Thompson was younger than Rodriguez, but equally dismissive of rookie officers who failed to meet his impossibly high standards for competence and street smarts. "Maybe if you spent less time trying to look cute and more time learning how to actually do police work, you could contribute something useful to this department instead of being dead weight that the rest of us have to carry." Alexis's jaw clenched at the casual sexism that had become a daily part of her existence at Metro PD, though her reaction was carefully calculated to appear like typical rookie frustration rather than controlled anger of someone who dealt with far worse discrimination in far more dangerous situations. She'd spent 5 years working undercover in environments where being discovered meant death, not just professional embarrassment, and the psychological pressure from Rodriguez and his cronies was nothing compared to maintaining cover while infiltrating organized crime families that kill people for asking the wrong questions. What would you do in Alexis's situation? Comment below if you think these veteran officers are about to learn the hardest lesson of their law enforcement careers, because what happens next will completely change the power dynamic at Metro Police Department forever. The morning's harassment session finally ended after 2 grueling hours that left Alexis's uniform wrinkled from handling heavy evidence boxes, and her patience worn thin from enduring constant criticism for tasks that any competent officer could have completed in half the time. As the day's shift settled into their regular routines of patrol assignments and case follow-ups, she found herself relegated to the evidence room, a cramped basement space filled with thousands of items from cases dating back decades. It was mind-numbing work that kept her isolated from the real police activities happening upstairs, but also provided something that Rodriguez hadn't anticipated: access to case files and evidence that revealed patterns of corruption and misconduct that went far beyond anything the FBI had suspected when they'd initiated this investigation. Officer Jenny Martinez, a 24-year-old rookie who'd started at Metro PD just 3 months after Alexis, occasionally ventured into the evidence room with the nervous energy of someone who knew she was risking Rodriguez's wrath by associating with his favorite target. She slipped between the metal shelving units with the cautious movements of someone trying to avoid detection. "Alexis, you okay down here?" Martinez asked quietly, glancing around to make sure they weren't being observed by any of the veteran officers who might report back to Rodriguez. "You look like you were about to snap when Thompson made that comment about looking cute instead of doing police work." Alexis managed a weak smile that didn't quite reach her ice-blue eyes, the expression carefully crafted to convey rookie frustration without revealing the controlled fury of someone who'd endured far worse treatment while maintaining much more dangerous cover identities. "I'm fine, Jenny. Just trying to learn the job and not make waves with the supervisors." Martinez studied her with the kind of insight that sometimes surprised Alexis, coming from someone so young and inexperienced. "You know, there's something different about you. Carter. Can't quite put my finger on it, but you handle Rodriguez's bullshit differently than most rookies. Like you've dealt with hostile authority figures before, you know what I mean. Alexis's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her expression neutral while continuing to catalog evidence from a drug bust that had happened 6 months before her arrival at Metro PD. Just try and stay professional and focus on doing my job correctly, same as any other officer. Maybe, Martinez said, but her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by the explanation. Just seems like sometimes you catch yourself before you react to things. Like you know more about police procedure than you're letting on, or like you've been trained to control your responses in ways that don't come naturally to most academy graduates. Before Alexis could respond to this uncomfortably accurate observation, the evidence room door burst open with enough force to rattle the metal shelving units that lined the walls. Sergeant Rodriguez stood in the doorway with his usual expression of barely controlled anger, clearly having been looking forward to this moment all morning. "Carter, Martinez, what the hell do you think you're doing down here?" he barked, his voice echoing off the concrete walls of the basement evidence storage area. "This isn't some social club where you come to chat about your feelings. Carter, you got evidence processing to finish, and Martinez, you got patrol duties that don't include babysitting our resident diversity hire." Alexis nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement that somehow managed to convey both compliance and dignity, despite the deliberate insult embedded in Rodriguez's command. "Yes, Sergeant. Just coordinating the evidence transfer for the Henderson drug case." "The Henderson case," Rodriguez repeated with a cruel smile that made Martinez shift uncomfortably near the doorway. "You mean the case where your incompetent evidence handling nearly got crucial drug samples thrown out of court because you couldn't follow basic chain of custody procedures? That Henderson case." Alexis felt a flash of genuine anger at the accusation, since she'd actually corrected several chain of custody errors that had been made by previous officers before her arrival, but she forced herself to maintain the facade of the chastened rookie who was still learning proper procedures. "I've reviewed the proper protocols since then, Sergeant. It won't happen again." Rodriguez stepped closer, invading her personal space with the kind of aggressive posturing that was designed to intimidate and humiliate rather than educate. "You're damn right it won't happen again, because I'm going to be watching every move you make until you either shape up or ship out. And Martinez, since you seem to enjoy Carter's company so much, you can join her for inventory duty after your shift ends. Maybe spending 12 hours organizing evidence will teach you both something about following orders and maintaining proper focus." Martinez's face fell as she realized her moment of kindness had earned her a punishment assignment, but she nodded without complaint, understanding that any attempt to argue would only make things worse for both of them. Alexis felt a stab of guilt at getting another officer punished for her sake, but she also knew that any attempt to defend Martinez would only confirm Rodriguez's suspicions that she was a troublemaker who encouraged insubordination among the other rookies. That afternoon, as Alexis and Martinez worked in the cramped evidence room organizing thousands of items ranging from weapons to drug samples to personal effects from crime scenes, she found herself wrestling with the constant temptation to drop her cover and reveal her true identity and purpose at Metro PD. One phone call to her FBI handler would bring federal investigators swarming into the precinct and transform her from the department's favorite punching bag into someone whose every word carried the weight of federal authority. But it would also compromise months of careful investigation and potentially allow corrupt officers to destroy evidence or intimidate witnesses before they could be properly prosecuted. "Carter, can I ask you something personal?" Martinez said as they worked their way through a particularly tedious section of evidence from burglary cases that had been closed years earlier. "Why'd you really become a cop? And don't give me that line about serving the community that everyone tells the review board. There's something else going on here." Alexis paused in her cataloging of stolen jewelry from a case that had been solved 3 years ago, a diamond necklace hanging from her fingers as she considered how much truth she could safely reveal without compromising her investigation. "I wanted to make a difference, I guess, to prove that I could contribute something meaningful to law enforcement, even if I don't fit the typical profile of what people expect from a police officer." "Make a difference," Martinez repeated thoughtfully. "Carter, you talk like someone who's already made a difference somewhere else." Most academy graduates are nervous about their first real police work, but you seem more frustrated than nervous. Like you're used to having more responsibility and authority than you're getting here. Alexis realized she'd said too much, revealed a perspective that didn't match her carefully constructed background as a fresh academy graduate with no prior law enforcement experience. I just meant that I want to earn my place here and prove that I can handle real police work, not just the busy work they give to rookies. Martinez was quiet for a moment, processing Alexis's words with the kind of careful thought that suggested she was putting together pieces of a puzzle she didn't fully understand. You know, Carter, sometimes you move like someone who's had tactical training beyond what they teach at the academy. The way you scan rooms when you enter them, the way you position yourself near exits, even the way you handle evidence when you think nobody's watching. It's not natural behavior for a civilian who just graduated from basic police training. Alexis's blood ran cold as she realized that despite all her efforts to appear like a struggling rookie, her years of federal law enforcement training were showing through in ways she hadn't anticipated. I just try to be thorough and follow proper procedures. Maybe I'm overthinking things because I want to do everything correctly. Maybe, Martinez said again, but her tone carried the same skepticism that was becoming uncomfortably familiar. Or maybe there's more to Alexis Carter than meets the eye, and someday you're going to tell me what you were really doing before you came to Metro PD. Before Alexis could respond to this dangerously accurate speculation, the evidence room door opened to admit Detective Thompson with an expression that suggested he'd been looking forward to interrupting their work. Behind him stood Captain Williams, the precinct commander whose presence in the evidence room was unusual enough to immediately raise Alexis's alert level. Carter, Martinez, front and center, Thompson commanded, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made both officers immediately stop what they were doing and stand at attention. Captain Williams wants to discuss some concerns about evidence handling procedures, and your names have come up in connection with some discrepancies we discovered. Alexis felt her heart rate spike as she realized that her careful investigation might have been discovered, or that someone had noticed inconsistencies in her behavior that didn't match her cover identity. Captain Williams, a stern-faced man in his late 40s whose reputation for running a tight ship was legendary throughout the department, stepped forward with a kind of serious expression that suggested this wasn't a routine administrative discussion. "Officer Carter," Williams said, his voice carrying the weight of command authority that had made him legendary for maintaining discipline and order in one of the city's most challenging precincts. "I've been reviewing some unusual patterns in evidence processing over the past several months, and your name has appeared in connection with several cases where previous errors were mysteriously corrected without proper documentation of who made the corrections or why they were necessary." Alexis maintained her composure while her mind raced through the implications of what Williams was saying. During her 8 months at Metro PD, she'd indeed corrected numerous evidence handling errors that she discovered during her investigation, but she'd been careful to make those corrections look like routine administrative updates rather than deliberate interventions by someone with advanced forensic training. "Sir, I just try to follow proper procedures when I'm processing evidence," Alexis replied carefully, choosing each word like someone defusing a bomb. "If I noticed any discrepancies, I would have corrected them according to department protocols." Williams studied her with the kind of penetrating gaze that had made him legendary for identifying problem officers before they could cause serious damage to department operations. "Officer Carter, these weren't minor clerical errors. These were significant chain of custody problems that could have resulted in evidence being thrown out of court, and somehow they were all corrected by someone with extensive knowledge of federal evidence handling procedures." The words hung in the air like a live grenade with the pin pulled. Alexis could feel Martinez watching her with growing suspicion, while Thompson and Williams waited for an explanation that could either maintain her cover or expose the truth about her real identity and purpose at Metro PD. "I studied federal procedures extensively at the academy, sir," Alexis said, knowing that her answer was weak, but hoping it would buy her time to figure out how to handle this increasingly dangerous situation. "I want to make sure I understood all aspects of proper evidence handling, not just local department procedures." Williams nodded slowly, but his expression suggested he wasn't entirely satisfied with her explanation. "Officer Carter, academy training covers basic evidence procedures, But what I'm seeing in these corrected files suggests knowledge of federal forensic protocols that aren't taught to local police officers. Can you explain how you acquire this level of expertise?" Before Alexis could answer, the precinct alarm system suddenly screamed to life with a piercing wail that indicated a major emergency was developing somewhere in the city. The evidence room's emergency radio crackled with urgent transmissions that made everyone freeze in place. All units. We have a code red situation at First National Bank on 5th Street. Multiple armed suspects. Hostages confirmed. Federal response requested. Repeat, this is a federal incident with local support requested. All available units respond immediately. Captain Williams' demeanor instantly shifted from administrative inquiry to operational command as he processed the information flooding through the radio. "Thompson, get upstairs and coordinate our response with the federal teams. Martinez, you're with patrol backup. Carter, you stay here and secure the evidence room until the situation is resolved." As the other officers rushed toward the stairs to respond to what was clearly a major crisis, Alexis found herself alone in the evidence room with a decision that would change everything. She could maintain her cover and continue her investigation, or she could reveal her true identity and use her federal training to help resolve a situation that was exactly the kind of crisis she'd been trained to handle. The radio continued to crackle with updates that made the severity of the situation increasingly clear. Suspects are heavily armed and have taken approximately 12 hostages. We're getting reports of possible explosive devices. Federal negotiators are en route, but we need immediate tactical support. Alexis stared at the radio for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, knowing that her next decision would either preserve 8 months of careful investigation or expose her true identity in the most dramatic way possible. But as she listened to the reports of innocent hostages facing armed criminals with explosives, she realized that some situations were more important than maintaining cover identities. She reached for her cell phone and dialed a number that would connect her directly to the FBI's Tactical Operations Center, a number that Officer Alexis Carter shouldn't have known, but that Special Agent Alexander Phoenix Carter had memorized years ago. "This is Agent Carter, badge number 7749. She said into the phone, her voice carrying the kind of professional authority that had been absent from her interactions at Metro PD for 8 months. "I'm currently embedded at Metro Police Department and need immediate tactical support for a hostage situation at First National Bank. I'm breaking cover and requesting extraction with full federal backup. Get ready, because what happens when this FBI agent reveals her true identity will leave you absolutely stunned and questioning everything you thought you knew about undercover operations. Smash that like button if you're ready to see some serious federal justice served." The response to Alexis's phone call was immediate and overwhelming. Within minutes, black SUVs with federal plates were screaming toward Metro Police Department, while FBI tactical teams prepared to transform a local bank robbery into a federal operation that would involve some of the Bureau's most elite specialists. Alexis quickly shed her police uniform in favor of tactical gear that she kept hidden in her locker for emergencies, exactly like this one, revealing the kind of professional equipment that no rookie officer should have possessed. As she emerged from the evidence room wearing full federal tactical gear and carrying weapons that were clearly far beyond standard police issue, Captain Williams and the other officers who remained in the precinct stared at her with expressions that ranged from shock to confusion to growing understanding that their rookie officer was not who she'd appeared to be. "Carter, what the hell is going on?" Williams demanded, his voice carrying the kind of authority that was rapidly being overshadowed by the federal response that was converging on his precinct. "Where did you get that equipment? And why are you dressed like some kind of federal agent?" Alexis turned to face Williams with an expression that was completely different from the uncertain rookie who'd been organizing evidence files just minutes earlier. Her ice blue eyes carried the kind of professional confidence that had been carefully hidden for 8 months, and her bearing suggested someone accustomed to commanding tactical operations rather than following orders from local supervisors. "Captain Williams, my name is Special Agent Alexander Carter, FBI," she said, producing federal credentials that explained everything about her presence at Metro PD, while simultaneously raising dozens of new questions. "I've been conducting an undercover investigation into corruption and misconduct allegations at this precinct for the past 8 months. The hostage situation requires me to break cover and assume operational command of the federal response. Williams stared at her credentials with a kind of expression that suggested his entire understanding of reality was being fundamentally reorganized. You're FBI? You've been undercover here for 8 months? What kind of investigation requires that level of deception? The kind that involves allegations of evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and potential connections to organized crime that couldn't be investigated through conventional oversight methods. Alexis replied with professional directness that left no room for misunderstanding. But right now, we have innocent hostages who need immediate tactical response, and I'm the only federal agent currently on scene who can coordinate with your local units. The sound of helicopters overhead and the arrival of additional federal vehicles outside the precinct made it clear that Alexis's phone call had triggered a massive law enforcement response. Through the windows, they could see FBI tactical teams setting up command posts and establishing perimeters around the bank where the hostage situation was still developing. Martinez, who'd been listening to this exchange with growing amazement, suddenly spoke up with a mixture of admiration and betrayal in her voice. So everything about you is a lie? Your background, your inexperience, even your struggles with basic police work. Alexis turned to Martinez with an expression that combined professional necessity with genuine regret about the deception she'd been forced to maintain. Not everything, Jenny. My commitment to law enforcement and my desire to make a difference were completely genuine. But my methods and my real qualifications were necessarily hidden to protect the investigation. Before Martinez could respond, Agent Sarah Mitchell, Alexis's FBI handler and tactical coordinator, entered the precinct with a kind of professional urgency that suggested the hostage situation was escalating rapidly. At 38, Mitchell represented the FBI's most experienced crisis management specialists, and her presence indicated that the bank robbery had federal implications that went beyond simple armed robbery. Agent Carter, Mitchell said, using Alexis's real title for the first time in 8 months, we need you at the tactical command post immediately. The hostage situation involves suspects who match the profile of the organized crime connections you've been investigating. This might not be a random bank robbery. Alexis felt her blood run cold as she realized that her undercover investigation and the current crisis might be connected in ways that would make the situation far more dangerous and complex than anyone had initially understood. Agent Mitchell, are you suggesting that this hostage situation is related to the corruption I've been investigating at Metro PD? We're not sure yet, but the suspect equipment and tactics suggest professional criminal organization rather than opportunistic robbery, Mitchell replied. We need your knowledge of the local corruption network to help us understand whether this is a diversionary tactic or if there are connections we haven't identified. Captain Williams, who'd been listening to this exchange with growing concern about the implications for his department, stepped forward with obvious alarm. Agent Carter, are you telling me that my officers might be connected to this hostage situation? That this bank robbery might be related to corruption in my precinct? I can't discuss the details of an ongoing investigation, Captain, Alexis replied with professional discretion. But I can tell you that the patterns we've identified suggest connections between certain Metro PD personnel and organized criminal activities that can include bank robbery, money laundering, and witness intimidation. The words hit Williams like a physical blow as he began to understand that his precinct had been under federal investigation for months without his knowledge, and that officers under his command might be involved in criminal activities that had just escalated to a federal crisis involving innocent hostages. Martinez, meanwhile, was staring at Alexis with the kind of expression that suggested she was reassessing every interaction they'd had over the past few months. All those times Rodriguez was giving you extra assignments and punishment details, you were actually investigating him? You were gathering evidence while pretending to be incompetent. Rodriguez's treatment of rookie officers was part of a larger pattern of misconduct that needed to be documented, Alexis confirmed. But his abuse was also genuine, and my responses to it were based on real frustration with systematic problems in how this department handles personnel who don't fit traditional expectations. The radio crackled with an urgent update from the bank that made everyone in the precinct understand that the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Suspects are demanding safe passage and threatening to execute hostages if their demands aren't met within 30 minutes. We need federal negotiators on scene immediately Agent Mitchell turned to Alexis with a kind of urgent expression that suggested critical decisions were being made in real time. Agent Carter, we need you to brief the tactical team on everything you've learned about organized crime connections in this area. If this bank robbery is connected to your investigation, your intelligence could be crucial to resolving the situation safely. As Alexis prepared to leave Metro PD and assume her real role as a federal agent, she turned back to Williams and Martinez with an expression that combined professional necessity with genuine regret about the way her investigation had been conducted. Captain Williams, I know that discovering you've had a federal agent embedded in your precinct for 8 months feels like a betrayal of trust, she said. But the allegations that prompted this investigation were serious enough to require extraordinary measures. What we've documented will lead to significant changes in how this department operates. Williams nodded grimly, understanding that his department was about to face federal scrutiny that would result in prosecutions, policy changes, and probably the end of several officers' careers. Agent Carter, I appreciate that you are doing your job, but I need to know how many of my officers are going to be arrested when this investigation concludes. That depends on what the evidence reveals about their level of involvement in criminal activities, Alexis replied honestly. But I can tell you that the corruption goes deeper than anyone suspected, and some officers will definitely face federal charges. Martinez stepped forward with a question that had obviously been bothering her since the revelation of Alexis's true identity. Agent Carter, when Rodriguez was abusing you and giving you punishment assignments, were you ever tempted to break cover and show him who you really were? Alexis allowed herself a small smile that revealed something of the satisfaction she'd felt at maintaining her cover despite months of harassment. Every single day, Jenny. But proving that I could endure his abuse while documenting his misconduct was part of building a case that will protect future officers from the same treatment. As Alexis left Metro Police Department for what would likely be the last time, she reflected on the 8 months she'd spent as Officer Carter, enduring harassment and discrimination while gathering evidence that would transform law enforcement practices throughout the region. Her undercover investigation had been one of the most challenging assignments of her career, but it had also been one of the most important, exposing systematic problems that had been hidden behind the blue wall of silence for far too long. The bank hostage situation was resolved 6 hours later when FBI tactical teams, guided by Alexis's intelligence about organized crime connections, successfully identified and arrested suspects who were indeed connected to the corruption network she'd been investigating. The raids that followed led to the arrest of 12 Metro PD officers, including Sergeant Rodriguez, who were charged with federal crimes ranging from evidence tampering to conspiracy to commit armed robbery. 2 weeks after the dramatic conclusion of her undercover assignment, Special Agent Alexander Phoenix Carter stood in the FBI's regional headquarters, receiving commendations from the director himself for her successful infiltration of one of the most corrupt police departments in the region. Her 8 months as a struggling rookie had exposed systematic problems that led to comprehensive reforms in police training, oversight, and accountability measures. Sergeant Rodriguez, whose harassment of the woman he believed was an incompetent rookie had been documented in excruciating detail, received a federal prison sentence of 15 years for his role in the corruption network. His treatment of Alexis had been used as evidence of the toxic culture that had enabled criminal behavior to flourish within the department. Officer Jenny Martinez, who'd shown kindness to a colleague she believed was struggling, was recruited by the FBI for specialized training in internal affairs investigations. Her observations about Alexis's inconsistent behavior had actually helped document the difficulty of maintaining deep cover identities in law enforcement environments. Captain Williams, who'd been unaware of the corruption in his department, worked closely with federal investigators to implement reforms that would prevent similar problems in the future. His cooperation with the investigation and his immediate action upon learning about the issues earned him a transfer to FBI liaison duties where his experience with departmental reform was invaluable. As for Alexis herself, she returned to federal service with a new understanding of the challenges faced by local law enforcement officers and a deep appreciation for those who maintained their integrity despite systematic pressures to conform to corrupt practices. Her next assignment would take her to another department, another cover identity, and another opportunity to root out corruption that threatened the foundation of American law enforcement. The story of Officer Alexis Carter's 8 months at Metro Police Department became legendary within federal law enforcement circles. A reminder that sometimes the most effective investigations required extraordinary sacrifices, and that justice often came from the most unexpected sources. Her experience as a struggling rookie had exposed truths that conventional oversight could never have uncovered, proving that sometimes the best way to police the police was to become one of them. Wait, before you go, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We want to see how far this incredible story of federal justice has traveled. And hey, if this FBI revelation blew your mind, hit that like button, because you won't believe what other undercover stories we have coming next. That was intense, but there's more where that came from. Click this video right now to see another undercover agent whose true identity shocks everyone when the truth finally comes out in the most dramatic way possible.